Welcome to another Journal Club. If you haven't had a chance, check out the other ones I have. But I don't know what number it is. I'll have to look and see what number it is. I want to say it's in the 20s, high 20s at this point. Anyway, this is an interesting study. It's a training study. If you haven't seen my little rant on reductionism, I don't mind studies that are reductionistic, meaning that you're trying to find one variable that's the driver. But it's problematic when it comes to human beings, right? And human physiologies, nutrition, training. There's so many interactions that go on. It's very difficult to tease out one driver. Now, there might be one driver that's more prominent than the others. And again, I'm just being ambiguous in my talking here. But it's really hard to just reduce it down because you lose those interactions. So I like training studies, even though you could poke lots of holes in them because human beings are human beings. That's why studying rats is a lot easier. They don't go home and have dinner or break up their girlfriend or they don't have those things, right? They eat the same thing over and over again and they sleep when you tell them to, right? Human beings, obviously, there's a lot more interactions that are going on with the world and the environment around, and therefore you could poke holes in studies. But I like this study for the topic, and there was some control manipulation checks put in here, like trying to look at diet, see if that was a factor. It was a very well done. I don't know if this was a dissertation or a master's thesis, but it has that kind of flavor to it. There's a lot of details, so perhaps it wasn't, but an interesting study. So let's get to it. The title of the study is High Resistance Training Volume Enhances Muscle Thickness in Resistance-Trained Men. This is by Brigado et al. Forgive me if I said that wrong. 2022. So this was in the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research. If you haven't noticed, I talk a lot about these articles out of the JSCR. It's a good journal, and it's the one I get in my email box too. But I certainly look at other journals, but there's a lot of good articles in here. So anyway, this one stuck out to me in this particular edition of the JSCR. And the reason is that there's a lot of interest, of course, in how much training volume is necessary for skeletal muscle hypertrophy, and is load more of a factor, right? And so this study was interesting, and also that it extended a lot of the training volume to higher training volumes. And so let me talk about the methods a little bit, and you can decipher if you think it's a valuable study. So first of all, it was in trained men, and what they did is they had the familiarization weeks and testing, and it was an 8-week study essentially, and 3 different groups. And these trained men, and we'll talk about if they're trained or not. The 3 different groups were 16 sets per muscle group, 24 sets per muscle group, and 32 sets per muscle group. So that was the whole crux of the study was with these different training volumes. Okay, what it is more better? Is more training volume better? All right, and so let's look at the participants, and we'll talk about the outcome variables here. Okay, so again, 8-week study. They had a kind of a week off at the end, which was nice as well. But 8-week studies was the bulk of the interest of this thing, right? In terms of what was the effect on the outcome variables of these different training programs. There was 9 individuals per training group. Okay, the individuals are described as trained, but there wasn't any initial strength values given. Now, obviously, you can deduce that strength values when you look at some of these tables. If you get a chance to look at this article, you can look at their pre-strength numbers. So let me give an example here of what the strength levels were, these individuals, because that's always a good indicator if somebody's trained. So they reported that these individuals have been training 3 times a week for over a year. That's all fine and good, but we all know that I can say that too, but have been training sporadically. That 3 times a week, or maybe trained in blocks and then took the 4 months off for summer or something like that. But individuals initial bench press in kgs, depending on the group, range from 93 kilos to 103. Back squat 105 to 121 kilos. And these individuals, again, trying to get a ratio here, that's fine and good, but what's the actual ratio of their strength to mass? The strength to mass ratio, which I think will be more telltale of if these individuals were in fact strength trained. And so their body masses to start here, let me find it real quick. I had this thing all torn to pieces, and now I'm trying to put it back together. Let's see. The total body mass was 80.6 for the whole group. So all 27 participants. So you're roughly at, if you look at their back squat, for example, it's a 1-to-1 ratio-ish for bench, and it's about 1.25 or so for back squat. So while these individuals are trained, I would not say they're highly trained. If you're benching your body weight, maybe 1.2. I'll be generous here. I think the ahjsT, obviously they are trained, but I would just, if you're somebody who's been training consistently for a while, and you're squatting 1.5 times your body weight and benching, a lot more than just your body weight, like maybe 1.2, 1.4, 1.5 as well. That's going to be important consideration. So I call these people strength trained, but I would say they're more towards the untrained side. Okay, how's that? That's my opinion, though. Somebody could argue and say, no, that's not true. This could be your typical gym goer, perhaps. I don't know. But I'm always interested in the participant's training status, because that is a big factor when it comes to evaluating effectiveness of the program. And in particular, that was a Department of Redundancy department. This particular study is if these individuals were more highly trained, would more sets actually be detrimental? And the authors do a good job of talking about this. Again, this is a well-done study. But would it be more detrimental then for those individuals to do more volume? As the individuals are getting better trained, would the cap come down, or would it be the opposite? Then that even more volume would be valuable. All right, so let's talk about the outcome variables here. I'm talking in circles here. Looked at strength values, so 1 RM bench press, 1 RM squat, and then also looked at muscle thickness, changes in muscle thickness. Okay, and specifically the muscles that were looked at were the biceps brachii, the triceps brachii, of course, and and then the vastus lateralis. So, arm musculature, smaller arm musculature, and then a muscle as part of the quads. All right, so 8-week study, trained men, 9 per group, very different volumes, targeting compound movements. Let's see, I underlined that here. Compound movements, let's see, 8, 12, and 16 sets of multiple joint, that's compound, and 8, 12, and 16 sets of single joint. Okay, and the program is actually in the study, which is also very helpful to take a look at. And the frequency was 4 times a week. Because of the high sets, you're talking the 32 set group, they were doing 8 sets of 8 to 10 RM. So going to repetition failure, 8 sets, that's a lot of volume. And it'll be interesting again to see how these individuals will tolerate this type of training for the long term. This might be a nice, what's Dr. Stone originally kind of coined this term, if I believe his first time I heard it from him, was an overreaching cycle, right? That's what this could be. And the authors again talk about this. This might be more effective in a periodized format, and I would agree with that. Okay, let's see here. I'm just double checking to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, initial values, there's a better table here than I was searching for. 93 kilo bench, 105 kilo squat, and initial body weight of 80 kilos. So, yeah, I won't go down that trail again of whether they're trained or not. But trained, yes. Well trained, no. How's that? All right. So what happened after these 8 weeks in terms of strength and body mass, and hypertrophy? So interestingly, strength changes roughly the same between the 16 set and 24 set group. So when it came to the bench press, there's a 23% increase for the 16 set group, and about 21% increase if you round up 24 and 21% increase in bench. The 32 set group though had a 29% increase. So more volume appeared to positively influence bench press strength. The squat, same type of trend, about 17%, 18% in the 16 and 24 group respectively, and then the 32 group, 25% increase. So bottom line is more volume, at least in this particular study, okay, in this particular participant pool, more volume produced greater strength increases. All right. Now this is just something worth noting. I think in the squat group that the 32 set group was the strongest one as well. So the 16 set group, and these are randomized, 16 set group, their average squat was 105 kilos, where the 32 set group was 121. So these individuals in the 32 group were already stronger. Now there's a plus or minus 20, 27 here, of course, but there is a difference. I think that's always worth looking at to say, okay, maybe the higher, and just randomized, but maybe the higher set group could tolerate those type of volumes and found benefit. If this would have been the 105 kilo squat group, in other words, the group that did 16 sets, maybe they wouldn't have found an effectiveness. We don't know. Okay, I just think it's always interesting seeing those initial values between these groups. In the bench press, it was about the same across. The 16 set group was weaker. In the bench press, it's about 5 kilo difference between the 32 and the 24 group. The 24 group was 103 kilo bench. So they started a higher bench press. And interestingly, they had the lowest percentage of increase in strength as compared to the others. All right, so what does that all mean? Training status matters. Initial values matter. And what I would what I'd be thinking was I looked at this study is knowing pressing, how difficult pressing, overhead and horizontal pressing, and how sensitive it is to fatigue and changes in body mass. That it looks like the group that was the strongest initially received the least amount of benefit from this training program. Now they still increased their bench by 21%. That's outstanding. That's 21 kilos plus or minus, of course, 21 kilos though. But that's just something to consider as you're wading through data. A lot of times I think those initial values, and that's why I kind of harp on, if you've heard some of my journal clubs, is who are the participants. That's such a big deal. Okay, what about hypertrophy? So strength gains, bottom line, strength gains, more volume seem to be more effective. However, we need to take into account the initial strength values. The hypertrophy changes. Let me flip this over here. Sorry, I should have been. There we go. Biceps improved 0.5% change in the 16 set group, 1.3 in the 24, and 3.1 in the 32. In the triceps, 0.8, 4, and 7% increases in the 16, 24, and 32 set group respectively. And in the vastus lateralis, 2%, rounded up 6%, 9%. So all that, if you're like, you're losing me on all these numbers, dude, more volume was helpful. And that is supported by the few training studies we do have on hypertrophy, is that if you want to grow muscles, you got to incorporate more training volume. What's interesting, these sets were to failure. These were 8 to 10 RM as well. It'd be interesting if they didn't go to failure, if that would have been more beneficial or not. It seems to be in the studies we do have is that, again, failure is optimized maybe in isolation movements, but not in compound because of the fatigue offset, right? There's so much fatigue accumulation. So I go back to, while there's on the surface, this study says more volume, more strength, more volume, more skeletal muscle mass improvements. I have to look at who these individuals are, and I have to think, well, and again, the authors address this. It's not like they're hiding this, is that this might be a really nice overreaching phenomenon that this 8-set group is incurring. I'm not doubting that more volume is producing greater hypertrophy gains. I would be concerned over time, though, if it would produce greater strength gains. And even more so, I would be interested to see if this 32-set group could tolerate this type of training volume for the long term. I think this study does support, again, this idea of having what we used to call it back in the day, the shock cycle, right? That you would do something beyond the body. And I do this when I do training clients in different ways. So for example, I might do a high rep cycle mixed in, just, like 16 rep cycle, just one though. It's the same thing you see in 5-3-1. You might, for strength, you might, do a 5-3-1 cycle, but if you've ever done 5-3-1, the second time it's not as effective because you might have had a big volume of training coming into 5-3-1, maybe doing sets of 8 and 6 and things like that. And then you hit 5-3-1 and you were able to realize all those volume gains that you've been making, like the skeletal muscle was larger, right? And now you're lifting heavier weights as a result. But if you continue to do 5-3-1, the volume isn't high enough in order to extend those strength gains continuously. I've seen this with eccentric training. A tempo cycle is nice. I mean, you do 4-second ride downs on the squat or whatever, but after one cycle of that, it tends to be ineffective, mostly because the load isn't high enough and or the volume isn't high enough. And so I wonder, even in this particular context, I'm not doubting that more volume does build more muscle mass. What I am saying, though, in this particular study is the significant gains that were made in the higher volume group may have been just the simple fact that there was such a big change in volume that the individuals saw these gains. I don't know, but I wouldn't try to, for the average gym goer, this would be quite an undertaking to do 8 sets of an exercise. Now, to be fair, they only did 4 to 5 exercises, but still, that is a lot of training, especially if you're going to failure. And so I would use some caution if trying to apply this study directly. The actual concept, though, which is the whole point of this study, I'm guessing, is that more volume equals better gains. And there's probably little doubt about that. It just has to be periodized and fatigue managed. Joint health, time to train, all those are factors that, in an ideal, this is why research is great. It's when everything is ideal. Well, oftentimes things aren't ideal. The other thing I wanted to highlight, and I'll quit here, this study is a progression. So this study just jumped into these high volumes. Okay. Now, if these individuals were at least somewhat trained, they could tolerate that. But in most individuals, let's say an untrained individual, or even your average gym goer that's maybe doing 3 sets, to drop them in an 8-set program might be a little rough in terms of DOMs and just being very careful about jumping volume that high. There should be a progressive overload, right? One of our basic exercise principles applied when looking at something like this. So don't jump, if you read this, oh, this is great, let's do 32 sets. True, but maybe don't do 32 sets next cycle, right? Work up. If you've been doing 16 or 12 sets per muscle group, it'd be a better idea, right, to slowly move up, maybe 3 more sets per cycle, and slowly build up and let your body adapt. Otherwise, you're going to pick up injuries potentially. And again, a study like this, it looks great on the surface, but the application of it can be a little rough. The concept is fantastic, but the application can be rough. Okay. Hope that was helpful. I'm sorry this was a little bit longer. I tried not to talk in circles, but there was some, and I left out some details, of course. Not a perfect study by any means, but training studies are so difficult. That's why you don't see too many of them. I think this is a fantastic attempt at trying to look at this idea of volume and how important it is with training. There's not many of these studies, and so this one was, I thought, for what it is, a fairly well done study. And it'd be worth your time to read a little bit more closely than my review, but hope you got the major concepts out of this video. If you like this video, like it, duh. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Check out some other stuff going on, whether it's talking about topics related to the field of exercise sports science, training, weight loss, all kinds of stuff, related to even this study, right? How do you build muscle mass? Okay, I'll see you in the next video.